What's up, pickleheads? Today I want to give you 3 killer tips to make your serve faster. Stick around because there's also a 4th tip that happens to be my favorite. Okay, let's start right out with tip number 1, and this is the whip. I've taught this before. What I used to do when I first started pickleball is put all my strength into my swing to try to get a faster serve. And I quickly found out that it wasn't working, that I wasn't, for some reason, strong enough, until I learned the whipping serve. So the way to put more spin and more speed on the ball with the whipping serve is with your wrist. I know in pickleball they say don't use your wrist. That's mainly related to the dink, and that's really only in the beginning also. Anyway, with the whipping serve, you want to make contact here and finish your contact here. So here's an example. I'll give 2 examples. The first one is going to be what I used to do, and that was use all the strength of my arm to try to get the ball over the net. That wasn't helping. Second example will be of the whipping serve, so that you can see how it works. So here's the first. Trying to put everything I can into the serve, and it's typically still not going that fast. I mean, people are going to return it pretty much with ease at most levels. For the second example, watch the difference here. You'll see my wrist flick at the end. It takes a little bit of practice because sometimes when you do this, the ball might fly, but after a while, you'll get it down. So here's the second. My swing isn't as big. I'm not using as much of my shoulder. I'm not trying to push it with my bicep or my tricep. I'm simply slapping the ball, okay, with a whipping serve instead of swinging with all my might all the way through. Let me see if I can give you a better example just in case. I'll serve this way and do so in slow motion. But basically, when I make contact with the ball, my wrist is back, cocked back. And when I finish making contact, my wrist is somewhat forward. And so that is slapping the ball and putting a lot more speed on the ball than I can by just keeping my arm and wrist straight and really going as hard as I can. So it's just a slap. And I'll give one more example of that. Kind of back and forth, slapping the ball. I refer to this as a whipping serve. You can think of it as a slap if that helps you. But this is one way that I've found to put much more speed on the ball. So here's a good example of this. This is Julian Arnold, who's a pro. He's not using his whole arm to hit the ball. He's simply flicking his wrist. Okay, here's tip number 2. Forget about your arm and your arm being the power. Where the power can come from and can help you a lot is actually your hips. This is something I learned in baseball. When you're swinging the bat, it's your hips that are pulling and giving you much more power than your arms will. So hips and then pull. Same thing with pickleball. On the serve, I'm starting back and my hips are going forward when I swing. This is generating much more power, and here's an example of it. Somewhat exaggerated example, but I want to let you know that we're going from deep here and forward. Whether you serve like this or you're more staggered, you can still use your hips. Either way, I'm using my hips as I serve. So maybe some of you do serve like this normally, or maybe some of you, your feet are more staggered when you serve. That's okay. Either way, you can use your hips to generate a lot more power. One exercise that I do in order to get more power is you can have a weight up here if you're holding a weight here and you're twisting back and forth, you can pretend to hit the ball this way too, and that will give you much more power as well. So step number one is the whipping serve. Use your wrist, not so much the power of your arm. And number two, turn those hips. Here's tip number three to make your serve faster. One way that I make my serve faster is bringing my momentum forward into the court. So you've got to be careful of one thing when you do this, and that is after you serve, obviously we have to wait for the double bounce rule. So the ball has to bounce before we can contact it. But I do want you to bring your momentum into the court. When you serve, you'll have a more powerful serve, but keep in mind, you have to trigger in your mind, after momentum goes into the court, I need to take a few steps back and be ready to receive the return from the other team. So here's an example of a normal serve, and then the second one will be an example of bringing my momentum into the court. So here's the first one. Okay, still get some power on the serve, not a problem. But if we want to be even more offensive, the second example would be, as long as I make contact before I step into the court, I'm good. So make sure the ball contacts the paddle prior to stepping in the court, and it's not a problem whatsoever. Here's an example. Then we need to step back and be ready for that return. Hopefully that return's not coming back because we've put them in a defensive position because our serve is even faster because our momentum brought us into the court. So here's another really good example of bringing your momentum forward. Dekel Bar, great pro, really fast serve, brings his body all the way into the court. And this with power allows him to win the entire point. So again, step one, the whipping serve, use that wrist. Step number two, hips don't lie, use your hips. You'll generate a lot more power. Step number three, like we just explained here, bring your momentum into the court. Now I promised a fourth bonus tip, and I'm gonna give that to you right now. All right, pickleheads, here's your fourth bonus tip. If you've ever watched pro pickleball, you've probably heard this and seen it. If you haven't watched pro pickleball, go ahead and watch it. It's all over YouTube. You can watch reruns. You can definitely learn that way. One thing I've learned, and it seems very simple, is to breathe out when you make contact with the ball. It seems, again, very simple, but just making contact while breathing out can give you more power and also more control with the ball. So listen next time you watch pros play, specifically Dekel Bar. Look him up. He has one of the fastest serves in pickleball. His momentum is bringing him forward, and he is always exhaling when he makes contact with the ball. So it sounds a little bit like this. Okay, just that breath out can give you a more accurate, more controlled, and faster serve. So another way that Dekel Bar gets a lot of power on the ball is with his exhale or his grunt. He blows out. You can hear it. It's pretty subtle here because we're watching it on camera, but this gives him a bunch of power and something you could try.
Go right in there.
All right, pickleheads, so here are the 4 steps one more time so you don't forget them. I guarantee you'll have a faster serve if you implement 1 or 2 or all of these tips. The first one is the whipping serve. Try to use that wrist instead of bringing all the power with your arm. Number 2, make sure to use your hips. Number 3, bring your momentum into the court and be ready for the return. And then bonus tip number 4, and one of my favorites, make sure to breathe out when you make contact with the ball. Try these out. You'll be more powerful on your serve. and we'll see you on the next one.